Thank you very much, Ted. Let's hear from the man. The mission for it, the research.
Yeah, I don't want to go on it too late. Of course, I'm prepared to speak. But I gather that some of you know a lot about fibrotic diseases, and others probably don't know that much about it. I'd certainly like to welcome you, and as Yoni said, my wife has been very much into science too, and it's unfortunate that she's ill and can't be here, but she's certainly here in spirit, and she obviously knows about all this. And she was a major contributor to the funds that came to Jefferson too. I have 5 grandchildren. One of them, the youngest daughter, is 4 years old, and believe it or not, her favorite question is why. And so some of the questions are rather simple, but they have complicated answers. And often I give an answer, she's not satisfied with it, and then she says, come back with another why. And so this whole process of trying to understand the world, and this is a child, you don't have to tell her to ask why. That's very spontaneous. This is sort of inherent in us as human beings. And so we can ask the question of why a Center for the Study of Fibrotic Diseases. And that can be answered at many levels. And perhaps the one that I'm going to give you is going to seem a little bit strange and unsurprising to you. But the fibrotic diseases, believe it or not, and collectively are responsible for about 40% of the mortality in the United States and the Western world. And so I think this is, I don't know how many of you think that's a reasonable number or unreasonable number, or it comes as a surprise or not. And unfortunately, these are a collection of diseases, and it's sort of under the radar. People are very concerned about cancer, they're very concerned about vascular disease, and the fact is that more people die collectively of fibrotic diseases than of either one of those 2 other nasty types of diseases. Now, so what are these? What do they consist of? Well, perhaps overly simply, we can classify them into 2 categories. One is those in which multiple organs are affected, or systemic diseases, and the classic one of these is one that Dr. Jimenez has worked on, and I've worked with him to some extent, scleroderma, systemic sclerosis. And in systemic sclerosis, scleroderma, the skin, of course, is affected. And that's what you see, and it's a nasty business. But unfortunately, internal organs are affected as well. Kidneys, the lung, and this is what causes real problems and is responsible for a lot of the morbidity of the disease and ultimately the mortality. And so that's one classification, that's the systemic. But there are other cases in which there are organ-specific diseases, such as the kidney, the lungs, the liver, and even in older age in the heart. So that these diseases themselves are individual, but nevertheless they have this commonality of fibrotic reactions. And now collectively, given the overall incidence of these diseases, they're devastating in their effects too. For some reason, it's not. I guess part of it is the fact that they often affect one organ, and they just don't have the same terror associated with them in the general population that you're certainly associated with cancer, which is a terrifying disease as soon as somebody knows that they have it. Tell somebody they have lung fibrosis, they may not even know what they've got, and they're not as scared, at least initially. Ultimately, they become scared enough. And because of the widespread incidence of these diseases collectively, they're a tremendous economic burden on society, and it's very costly and collectively. Now, for historical reasons, these diseases have been studied sort of independently. The pulmonologists studied lung fibrosis, the liver people studied liver cirrhosis, which is another name for liver fibrosis, and the people that are studying let's say the kidneys are also independent. So there's not a lot of crosstalk between, say, a scientist who is studying lung fibrosis and one who is studying, let's say, liver cirrhosis, even though there's certainly a commonality. And we know now that the end result of this is the accumulation of a large amount of something we call extracellular matrix, and all the scientists here know what extracellular matrix is, but basically it's a kind of scar tissue that accumulates. And this is due to the activation of cells in the particular organ or organs, which undergo a transformation from being sort of quiescent. And normally your fibroblasts that are in your skin aren't doing a heck of a lot. They're sort of just sitting there peacefully. But if they get tweaked by some kind of injury or inflammatory process, they turn into something called a myofibroblast, and that's what starts this fibrotic process going. So the difference between a normal healing wound is one in which if you get a cut, the fibroblasts migrate in, it's in the dermis, and they sort of repair things, and then things come to a stop. On the other hand, if this process continues in an uncontrolled way, you get too much of this scar tissue, and that's what causes the fibrotic reaction. So that because of this historic reason and the fact that there's this separation, which is for good reasons too, that the causes of the initial causes in any given tissue or organ can be different one from the other. So it's not just the fact that medicine evolved oriented around organs and the study of organs. There's difference. The etiology in a given tissue may be different from one from the other, so that there are differences, but there's a commonality. And this commonality is one of the things that's an unmet need. I think, as Joan kind of indicated, that fibrosis is there are commonalities between one tissue and another, even though they may have started off quite differently. So we think that this center, which is going to be devoted to fibrotic diseases in an all-encompassing way, is going to try to meet this need and look at the common things in order to try to determine the specifics at the molecular and cellular levels, where we can hopefully develop drugs that are going to be effective not just in a single instance, but in a more general way.